The Eagles just rewrote history with a performance no one saw coming. According to analysts, this was way more than a typical Super Bowl win. Philadelphia crushed the defending champions, neutralized Mahomes, and executed a near-flawless game plan. How did the Eagles' coaching staff outmaneuver Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo? What hidden factors sealed this game before halftime? And what made this game one of the most ruthless Super Bowl takedowns ever? Doubt followed the Eagles everywhere. The talent was undeniable, but the inconsistencies painted a different picture. Injuries stacked up, the offensive identity shifted, and critics were quick to question their legitimacy. Could they sustain their level of play against a dynasty built on resilience? Meanwhile, Kansas City, despite its struggles, was still led by Mahomes, Reid, and a defense that had carried them through the playoffs. Jalen Hurts had put up MVP-caliber numbers, over 4,000 passing yards, nearly 30 touchdowns, and elite rushing ability, yet his name was rarely mentioned in that conversation. The focus had been on quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy, while Hurts had quietly orchestrated one of the most balanced offensive attacks in football. The coaching staff knew what they were up against. Steve Spagnuolo, a defensive mastermind, had made a career out of neutralizing top quarterbacks on the biggest stage. His pressure-heavy schemes had given Patrick Mahomes breathing room in previous Super Bowls, but Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore weren't playing into his hands. The game plan was developed around precision, quick reads, and exploiting mismatches across the field. Every analyst had their predictions. Many expected the Chiefs to grind out another close victory. But behind closed doors, the Eagles had already found the blueprint. And once the game started, everything turned out exactly as planned. The opening drive shattered expectations. The Eagles didn't just move the ball, they controlled every variable. Every snap carried intention, and every read dismantled Spagnuolo's famed pressure packages. Blitzes that had decided playoff games before rendered meaningless. The trenches belonged to Philadelphia, and the Chiefs' front seven was forced into survival mode before the first quarter even ended. Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata held firm, turning Kansas City's pass rush into bystanders. Saquon Barkley's signing had raised eyebrows, but on this stage, he justified every decision behind it. The sheer presence of Barkley forced Kansas City's defense to stretch itself thin, leaving exploitable gaps across the field. But the biggest shock came from matchups the Chiefs hadn't prepared for. Jahan Dotson wasn't the name on scouting reports causing concern, yet there he was, to torch defenders with route precision. Halftime loomed, but the game had already slipped beyond reach. But what happened next was even more shocking. Adjustments were needed, but instead of playing against a scheme, the Chiefs were playing against a team that had already seen the ending. Some players rise to the occasion. Others redefine what's possible. Analysts claim that Jalen Hurts fell into the second category. The game still had a pulse in the third quarter, but Hurts made sure it didn't last. On a 3rd and long, pressure collapsed the pocket. A half-second hesitation would have led to disaster. Instead, Hurts reset his stance and unleashed a 40-yard strike to Devonta Smith, splitting double coverage with the utmost accuracy. Accuracy, composure, decision-making, every trait was on display in its sharpest form. He carved through Kansas City's defense with calculated precision. The numbers told one story: 221 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 72 rushing yards, and another score on the ground. But the moments told another. Patrick Mahomes had seen every type of defense until this one. This wasn't a game where a couple of bad plays doomed the Chiefs. This was systematic. From the first snap, Vic Fangio's scheme forced Mahomes into situations he had no control over. The usual escape routes? Gone. The quick reads? Taken away. The deep shots? Never there. The Eagles built a wall that contained Kansas City's offense completely. The front seven dictated everything. Josh Sweat and Jalen Carter led a pass rush that collapsed the entire pocket. 6 sacks, constant disruption, and the moment Kansas City tried to adjust, Quinyon Mitchell and the secondary took over. 2 crushing interceptions shattered the Chiefs' momentum. None more devastating than the 38-yard pick six that plunged their sideline into stunned silence. Then came the defining moment, the play where Mahomes' championship dreams crumbled before his eyes. Late in the third quarter, destiny came calling. Kansas City was trailing and facing 3rd and long. The snap barely settled in his hands before waves of pressure crashed in. Mahomes backpedaled desperately, searching for any glimpse of daylight downfield. But there was nothing but a sea of green jerseys. As he stepped up in a final bid to extend the play, Jalen Carter exploded through the line, driving the superstar quarterback into the unforgiving turf. The inevitable punt that followed was merely a formality. The cameras caught what everyone already knew. Mahomes on the sideline, head bowed in resignation, his haunted eyes fixed on the ground. The king of comebacks had finally met his match. The reality crystallized at that moment. Philadelphia had crafted a masterpiece with surgical precision that left no fight in Kansas City by the fourth quarter. Outcoaching Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo on the biggest stage may sound almost impossible, but reportedly, that's precisely what happened. While the highlights would capture the touchdowns and turnovers, it was the invisible chess match that truly decided this game. Every subtle pre-snap motion was a calculated trap, each disguised formation a carefully laid snare. Like master illusionists, Sirianni and Moore anticipated the Chiefs' defensive moves and puppeteered them. From the first drive, they dictated the pace, forcing the Chiefs to react instead of attack. Quick reads, misdirection, and a playbook tailored to eliminate Spagnuolo's ability to disguise coverage became Kansas City's undoing. The Chiefs desperately searched for cracks in the Eagles' armor, but failed to realize they were running through a maze of Philadelphia's design. Then came halftime, the moment the game ended, before it even restarted. The Chiefs had always been a second-half team, thriving on adjustments. But this time, they walked into a trap. The Eagles shifted protection schemes, mixed in new route combinations, and doubled down on attacking the weak spots Kansas City couldn't cover. Consequently, the third quarter hardly left any chance for Chiefs to touch the ball. Winning a Super Bowl goes way beyond execution. It's about staying locked in while the other team unravels. The Eagles managed momentum better than Kansas City at every turn. Sirianni and his staff tracked every shift in pressure and adapted before the Chiefs could react. When Spagnuolo sent extra blitzes, protections adjusted instantly. When Andy Reid changed alignments, Sirianni countered before the next drive even started. Philadelphia also had veterans ensuring no panic set in. Jason Kelce kept the offensive line controlled, while Fletcher Cox made sure every defensive player understood their assignments between drives. Kansas City's sideline, on the other hand, showed signs of frustration. Late play calls, miscommunications, and a defense that couldn't keep up. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, only one team looked like they had everything under control. The Chiefs weren't just beaten, they were drained. By the fourth quarter, their defensive front had no push, their secondary hesitated, and Mahomes looked like he was running on empty. The Eagles, however, still had the energy to press harder. Philadelphia built for this exact scenario. Their offensive line rotation kept their blockers fresh. Their run game forced Kansas City to exert energy on every down, and their defense never stopped pressing. From training camp to the playoffs, the team conditioned itself to close stronger than any opponent. Kansas City has survived tough games before, but this time, survival mode wasn't enough. The Eagles didn't let them breathe, didn't let them regroup, and by the time the final minutes arrived, there was nothing left to fight for. The dust has settled, but experts suggest that the impact of this victory will ripple through the league for years. For the Eagles, it was a statement that they are built for sustained dominance. And just like that, history is made. The Eagles left no doubt, and the NFL won't forget this one. And what's next for Kansas City? A comeback or the start of a decline? One thing's for sure, this loss will haunt them. And if you think this was the most brutal Super Bowl outcome, just wait for what's coming next. Subscribe now so you don't miss it.